Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Today, I'm Sheila Malcolmson, British Columbia's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. I first want to acknowledge we are on the territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish peoples. And I'd like us to begin by inviting Byron Joseph, who's the co-chair of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, one of our partners here today in the announcement, to welcome us. Thank you.
Siem Salquelum Queensna, Scohop Mashtamoch, Tanoyab the Sequel, the CI, Tanoyab the Qualmoch, Chalmoch, and Stalmoch. Chichain the Kokolo, Tuchtata Smanat, Tainamith Taekwans Wachucha Ada. Natemith Chachenak, the Sequan Tomoch, Nahoya the Chase the Milk, the Ekak Initiation, Quistima, Tanoyab, the CI. Tanoyab the Sequel, Twistimat. Thank you each and every one of you. On behalf of our Scoho Mashtamoch, our people here in this fine province of British Columbia, and just like to welcome you here to our lands. Boy, bless you.
Thank you so much, Uncle. Very grateful to be here together with you. I'm also joined by my friend and colleague, Murray Rankin, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, by Angela White, Executive Director of the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, along with Byron Joseph, co-chair, who you just met, and Colette Trudeau, Métis of Nation BC, Senior Director for Administration, Women and Youth. Welcome all. I first want to be very clear that today we're talking about Indian residential school survivors. To any survivors or intergenerational survivors, these are very hard conversations. If you're watching the live stream, I want you to take care of yourself. What we are talking about today will trigger difficult memories and cause distress. And I really encourage you to reach out to the very good people who are there to help at the residential school crisis line. The number is 866-925-4419, and I'll say that number again at the end of our presentation. The findings at the sites of former residential schools across Canada have been confirming of what we have been told for a very long time. They are heartbreaking, and they are revealing and terribly sad. It's a sharp reminder of the work we have to do, of the pain that takes many generations to heal, and a lot of hurt that is out there that we see every day in our country and our communities. It's important that we talk about it, and we keep sight of the supports that survivors and their families need to do that healing work today and into the future. I'm now going to invite Minister Rankin to talk a little bit more about this work.
Thank you very much, Minister Malcolmson, and thank you, everyone. It's my honor to be here in Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish territory today. I, too, would like to say thank you. Thank you to Angela White. Thank you to Tyrone Joseph, and thank you, of course, to Colette Trudeau. They've been introduced earlier, and I'm hoping you'll hear from them in a moment. I want to thank everyone who joined us today virtually and acknowledge the survivors, the intergenerational survivors and their families who continue to be impacted by the legacy of residential schools. I also want to say that this work does not stop. Communities across British Columbia are doing the difficult but essential work to find answers for the generations of families that attended residential schools in this province. And I know, and you know, that there's much more work to be done, and there'll be many more difficult days ahead. We often talk about the history of residential schools, but survivors and their families and communities know it's not history. The impacts continue to this very day. So we respectfully, the province, residential school survivors, their families, and the communities who've been impacted by these recent events. But one of the things that the province, all of us, can do is make sure supports are in place for those who need them. We've heard from Indigenous service providers that they have seen a dramatic increase in demand for mental health and wellness supports. In June, our province announced $12 million for BC's Residential School Response Fund, and we've now allocated $1.5 million of that for Indigenous service providers to address the urgent needs for culturally safe and trauma-informed supports. The added funding will strengthen existing mental health and wellness and cultural support services across the province. And it will provide resources for ongoing engagement and supports for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and communities affected. With this funding, the Indian Residential Schools Survivor Society will enhance its 24/7 cultural support line. The Slotan Lalem Society will be able to provide more in-person health, wellness, and cultural supports. And Métis Nation BC will add resources to its Métis Counseling Connection program. It's so important for Indigenous people to have access to the supports that they can trust, supports that understand the impact of the residential school system. It's important that these services be Indigenous designed and Indigenous delivered. These Indigenous service providers are here for those that are struggling. They have exceptional expertise in providing these vital supports. The $12 million in funding from the province to support communities and survivors supplements what the federal government has in place, which of course the federal government has significant role to play going forward in this response. In conclusion, this is a time of reckoning in British Columbia and across Canada. We must ensure as a government, as a society, and as individual British Columbians that we stand with Indigenous people and recognize the truth of our colonial system. This truth has long been known. It was well documented by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We will continue to put communities and survivors at the center of our response, to listen and to respond to what they need. We must ensure community survivors and intergenerational survivors are supported in this difficult period. We are approaching Orange Shirt Day on September the 30th. This is the day where, for the last number of years, we've acknowledged Canada's true history and have honored the strength and resilience of those that attended residential schools. The day when we say that every child matters. That is why we must take action and why we are taking action. Thank you. Je veux dire quelques mots en français aussi, s'il vous plaît. Aujourd'hui, on fait annoncement pour une dépense de 1,5 million de dollars pour appuyer les organismes qui appuient les peuples autochtones, qui adressent leurs souffrances partout au Canada, mais surtout en Colombie-Britannique. On donne ces ressources pour appuyer ceux et celles qui travaillent fort, toujours, quotidiennement, pour appuyer les victimes des écoles résidentielles dans cette province. Et j'espère plus tard que je peux répondre aux questions posées. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Rankin. And thank you for naming Slotan Lalem. It's a fantastic addictions treatment and healing center right in my backyard in Snana's territory. And I know how hard that they work all year round, but particularly since the revolutions at Kamloops and beyond. And another fantastic organization that is truly saving lives and building, just stepping up even further their support is the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. We met co-chair Byron Joseph at the beginning of the presentation, and I now call on Angela White, who's the Executive Director, to share some words about this funding and its impact. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Asiam Nisiaya Haitsepka Nishkwalo and Mastimo Snanemo Enthnapa Hakuma Tuk Enthnapa Angela White. I first off want to say how gratuitous I am for the province in stepping up and taking a leadership role in ensuring the mental health needs of each and every one of our Indigenous people across this province is being taken into consideration. IRSSS has tirelessly gone through so many years over the past 20 years in ensuring that there is cultural safety and spaces for each person that extends a hand out when it comes to their own wellness journey. We support so many people along the way, and it will enhance so many different programs that we already have in force, such as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, the Indian Day School, the Indian Day Scholar, the Two-Spirit LGBTQ community, as well as what Minister Rankin had said, the 24-hour crisis line. Some of the words that we have received from those that have partaken in that crisis line was they are happy to have a place where they feel safe, that they know that the person on the other end of the phone is Indigenous and that they understand where they're coming from and that they have the ability to extend even more assistance if required when it comes to the cultural safety. So on that note, I want to just say, hi, Septa.
Thank you so much, Angela. Another strong Snuneymuxw woman from the White family. We're very lucky as a province to have you in leadership. I now invite Colette Trudeau, who is Senior Director for Administration, Women and Youth for Métis Nation, BC, to bring your remarks. Thank you.
Tanse Dinishna Colette Trudeau. Hello, my name is Colette Trudeau, and this is starting out with a bang. I was going to say my full title, but we've been through it, and it's a bit of a mouthful. But it gives me great pleasure to join you today. I come here on behalf of MNBC's acting president, Lisa Dawn Smith, and the entire MNBC cabinet. Our cabinet is in Saskatchewan right now for an important national Métis government meeting and sends their regrets. Thank you, Minister Rankin and Malcolmson, for having us. Thank you, Angela White and Byron Joseph, for sharing your words and for opening us up in a really good way. Thank you. I am very pleased to be here on a day where the province of BC is pledging a commitment to enhance Indigenous-led wellness supports for residential school survivors. With this much-needed funding, MNBC will reach out and identify Métis residential school survivors and their families and provide them with much-needed connection to community and address their immediate needs with a specific focus on their emotional and mental health. Our Métis survivors have had to process multiple traumatic discoveries of mass graves, and they are facing these painful announcements in a time of increased isolation due to the pandemic. Through this investment, we aim to connect with residential school survivors and their families, offering them targeted supports and connections to other survivors. Increasing the public's knowledge and understanding of Métis residential school experience is an important outcome of this work. Many don't recognize that Métis people attended residential schools along with day and mission schools. In many cases, Métis children were transferred from school to boost their enrollment numbers. Some Métis families avoided residential school by pretending to be something they weren't. In my case, my family went underground and claimed to be French Canadian, which still resulted in the loss of our culture, our language, and our identity. Bringing this information to light will further validate the traumatic experience of Métis people. For a long time, the health and wellness needs of Métis people has been systemically underfunded in BC. This past year, we received funding by the federal government to respond to the mental health impacts in relation to COVID-19. With this funding, we launched a new initiative, Métis Counseling Connections, which offered 10 free counseling sessions per Métis participant. Within days, we were oversubscribed and had to start waitlisting our citizens. To date, over 300 of our Métis citizens have been served by this program, but we know more can be done. With this funding, we will prioritize counseling services for Métis residential school survivors and their families. This may also include our 60 Scoop survivors, as they are intergenerational survivors. MNBC will also be hosting a provincial Métis residential school survivors forum. MNBC is a provincial organization with citizens spread across the province of BC. Providing a forum to bring together survivors and their families in a central location is pivotal to healing. Residential school survivors will be engaged and pivotal to the planning of the forum and how information is collected and shared. MNBC plans to host the Provincial Residential School Survivors Forum late spring of 2022. Weaving together the Métis voices of residential school survivors and documenting and learning from them as respected Métis elders and knowledge keepers is critical. I'd like to thank the province for recognizing the need to provide this funding to Métis Nation British Columbia. We are grateful for their partnership on this extremely important issue and look forward to working closer on a renewed relationship between MNBC and the province of BC. Merci.
Thank you so much to Métis Nation BC for standing with the province in this work. It's a vital partnership, and we're grateful that you are stepping up in this most challenging time. This is a critical time, and what supports we are able to bring collectively to put in place today for wellness and community support will play a very important part in the healing that lies ahead. This is work that is investing in the future. We will keep listening. We will keep being guided by what Indigenous communities tell us is most important. And mental, emotional, and cultural supports for survivors, intergenerational survivors, and communities are vitally important right now. And our province and our government, led by the Premier, is very honored to do this vital work at this crucial time. Again, I'd like to pass on the number for the residential schools crisis line. If you need help, please do reach out. You have very warm-hearted and very talented and respectful people waiting to support you. The number is 866-925-4419. We now welcome questions from the media.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to all our speakers. A reminder to reporters on the phone, please press *1 to enter the queue. That's *1 to ask a question. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Please also remember to take your phone off mute. You will not be audible until your name is called. Our first question today is from Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone, for doing this today. I'd like to ask about these specifics. Can you give me a breakdown of the amount of dollars which is going to each organization and why these three organizations were chosen? Because obviously we can't cover everyone at once. I'm just wondering why these three are first.
Thanks very much, Lisa. The monies are going technically to the First Nation Health Authority, which is doing such extraordinary work, but earmarked as follows. $750,000 of the $1.5 million is going to the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, $500,000 to the Slotan Lalem Society, and lastly $250,000 to Métis Nation BC to expand the Métis Counseling Connection program. It's our view that these organizations have proven themselves as extraordinarily important in providing what Angela talked about, Indigenous-led, Indigenous-delivered services. People at the end of the phone is one aspect of their work, understanding the reality of residential school survivors, their families, and the trauma that the school system has created.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Minister, this is part of the $12 million already pledged by your government. Can we expect to see similar announcements about how the rest of this money will be spent?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. You're right. The government has of British Columbia supplementing the money, the millions of dollars that the federal government has provided to address this part of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. The province has put $12 million down. And it is money that is not time limited. It's money that can be taken up by nations as they see fit. There are 21 so-called caretaker communities in British Columbia, each which are the communities near the residential school in question. So, for example, the Tecumloops-Shrepmuk in Kamloops is the caretaker community for that residential school, but are looking after the interests of other nations because, as you know, students came from far and wide to attend the residential schools in BC. So each of those 21 caretaker communities, as well as those dealing with the 3 main Indian residential hospitals in the province, they've been given $475,000, up to $475,000 to deal with the work that they are doing. The point is that this $1.5 million that's earmarked today, as I've described, is part of that $12 million that has been allocated. Something like $2.85 million to date has been taken up, but as I stress, this money is available, the remaining funds, and will be taken up as caretaker communities consider it when they've come to the decision as to how they wish to spend it, and the province will be working with them going forward to that end.
Our next question is from Marcella Bernardo, News 1130.
Hi there. You kind of answered one of my questions about the breakdown, but if you could maybe elaborate, I'm not sure who can speak about this, but I heard Colette talking about how, people had to go underground and the traumatic experiences. So maybe somebody could break down again what specifically is being done to help people resolve that trauma. Like if you could give us an example of somebody calls the crisis line, what support is offered to them.
Very much, Michelle. I think it's appropriate that I give the mic over to one of my colleagues to answer that.
Sure. So thank you for your question. What's really critical, and again, it goes back to Angela's comments, it's about having someone on the other line who's Indigenous, who understands their lived experience, has cultural competency associated with having these types of conversations, and that empathy that comes with these conversations. So it's really about having someone who understands on the other side of the phone and can speak to and help people work through the traumas and have those difficult conversations and know that they're not alone. It's so often when I hear the story about people's families going underground, and again, my family is one of those families, and we look to our youth who are those who are really revitalizing our culture and our language. But it's working through those traumas and having appropriate supports so that in having those conversations, they're not further being they're not experiencing further trauma by having someone who doesn't truly understand. So I'll pass it over to Angela as well.
Hi, thank you for the question. I think what you can expect when you do call is, one, they will ground you to make sure that you have that ability to not leave that conversation in a harmful way, or making sure that you know the avenues you need to take to ensure that you or anyone else has the support required. Part of what they also do is, if once they are grounded at our crisis line, if they require additional cultural support, we will then make sure that they are referred to the appropriate cultural person, and looking at what they, after that discussion, matching them up with the right elder. And then that elder will take them through, whether it's in person now, that if they're doubly vaccinated, or on Zoom calls. A lot of our stuff has transitioned quite quickly to online counseling. And however, what we have found over the last 20 years is that cultural safety on the land, on the water, healing is what is most successful.
Marcella, do you have a follow-up?
I don't. Thank you very much.
Our next question is from Elizabeth McSheffrey from Global.
Hi there. Of course, on September 30th, Canada is going to mark its first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I know the government of BC did not declare that a statutory holiday here. I'm wondering if you can provide an update on how the consultation on that decision is going and whether that may change for next year.
Thanks very much. I was so pleased when the federal government enacted the Truth and Reconciliation Day. I had involvement as a member of Parliament in a private member's bill suggesting that day be created as Orange Shirt Day. They've rechristened it to National Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I'm delighted that the federal government and all those in the federally regulated private sector will be celebrating that day, or at least acknowledging that, taking that day to remember. As for British Columbia, all of the public sector employees and many of the school districts and municipality employees are going to have that day as well. But the consultations with the broader private sector are ongoing as we speak, and there will be no doubt announcements made over the next while as to how that unfolds in this province, just as is occurring across this country.
Elizabeth, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. This question is for either Ms. White or Ms. Trudeau, whoever wants to weigh in. I'd just like to know what you'd like British Columbians to be thinking about, to be reflecting on September 30th. You know, some people will be off work, some people won't be off work, but how can we all mark that day in our own way?
Thank you for that question. It's a really important question because as this, I never say discovery, as this has been unveiled, this truth, what other Canadians and British Columbians can do is really simply take pause, take notice, do your own education, do your own research, and if you can, reach out and try and talk to either an intergenerational survivor or a survivor from residential school, and be open to their story and listen and really try to figure out where they're coming from and believe what they're telling you. So many years have gone by for these survivors that they lived with the shame of not having people believe, because that's exactly what they were told, is that their stories were meaningless, that no one would ever believe them over a priest or a nun. So this is very vital. And I think if it's just the smallest step you can possibly do, wear some form of orange, just to acknowledge that you hear them, that you believe them, and that you see them.
Our next question is from Susanna De Silva, CBC.
Thank you very much. Just wondering if perhaps Ms. White could speak to a bit about the demand that you've seen for your services since that revelation, as was mentioned. What the demand has been like for your services.
Thank you again. Immediately after the 215 announcement, I will say that we enacted the crisis line on our own and trying to figure out how we're going to do this, and a good portion of, I say the majority of the money that is provided is to ensure that this crisis line is up and running with the appropriate staff and qualified people to do so. What our numbers speak for themselves in that sense. Like I think it was 2 days after, for the next month and a half, our call line was averaging probably anywhere between the hours, and this is just based on the call log, between the working hours of 8:30 to 4:30, our call line was inundated with over 500 to 600 calls during those hours. That's not including the 4:30 to 8:30 during the night. When our crisis line workers were working at its peak, each person was averaging about 30 to 45 calls during the evening. It has now subsided, but it just goes to show the need, how necessary these places are, and I can't express enough for the province for stepping up to ensure that this line on its own can carry forward for the rest of this fiscal year. So I hope that answered your question.
Susanna, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. And sort of to continue to that, I mean, with Thursday approaching and, there's discussions and a lot of events happening and recognition, are you sort of preparing for, again, sort of an increased demand? And is there more in the even shorter term that you need and going forward to continue to be ready for this year and the years going forward?
I think we are as ready as we possibly can be. Our crisis line workers are separate from our resolution health support workers, and so they actually will monitor those phones leading up to and past September 30th. What we have done to prepare for this is we have about 30 full-time staff and about 36 cultural supports that aren't on a regular salary. And I will let you know, each and every single one of those people are assigned to various organizations, events, and supports that have been requested, not just in this province of British Columbia, but we also have many virtual supports that have been requested from Ontario. And so we keep getting these last-minute requests coming in, but unfortunately we just don't have that capacity to ensure that every single request is going to be met. But we have, I think, just moving forward, using parts of these dollars to get clinical therapists on staff so that they can actually start assisting and breaking the waiting game or the waiting period and the wait list for a clinical therapist through the First Nations Health Authority, and just getting people used to sharing their story in a clinical environment so that once they do get assigned a full-time therapist, they are ready and willing and able to move forward on their wellness journey.
Those are all the questions we have. Thanks for joining us.
That concludes the press conference today. Thank you so much to Minister Rankin, to our Uncle Joseph for bringing the words forward, to Angela White and to Colette Trudeau for being with us, for giving such a strong picture of the imperative of the work that you're doing, how proud we are as a government to partner with you because you're doing such good work. And I'll just close by saying to anybody watching, please send your strength to these people that are doing such important work. It's vital work, it's hard work, it's hard on the heart, I'm sure, sometimes. And please, to everybody that is working with Southern Lalem, with the Métis First Nation of BC and the Indian Residential School Survivors, thank you on our behalf to the people that are doing the work. We're counting on it, and we're glad to be working together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information, and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help. How we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.